This is the video for 8.8 and we are talking about how to factor by grouping. So whenever you have a polynomial that has 4 terms, often you can factor this by a process called grouping. So let me show you how to do this. The first step is I want to rewrite the polynomial as a sum of 2 groups. Pause the video as I'm showing you how to do this and work this out with me. Make sure that you understand each step in this process. I want to rewrite this polynomial as a sum of 2 groups. Then I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor from each group. Again, pause the video to make sure that you understand what I did. I want to factor out the greatest common factor from each group. Now, once I did so, look at what I have left. I have a common factor of n minus 4 in each term. So then I can factor out the common factor of n minus 4 from each term, and then once I do so, what do I have left? I have 3n squared plus 2 left. So my final answer is going to be 3n squared plus 2 times n minus 4. So these are the 2 binomial factors of this polynomial. Now, if you're not really quite sure how I went from this step to this final answer, let me explain it to you this way. When I multiply these 2 binomials together, what am I doing? Well, I'm foiling. And what do I do when I FOIL? What I'm doing is I'm taking this term of 3n squared and I'm multiplying it with n minus 4, one term at a time. But I'm taking 3n squared times n minus 4. Well, that's what this is. And then what do? When I'm foiling this, I take a positive 2 times n minus 4. And that's what this is. So that's why this and this are equivalent. And so how do I check my answer? Well, I multiply these 2 binomials together. I FOIL it out. And once I do so, and once I put it in standard form, this will be my final answer. These are the 2 binomial factors of this polynomial. So now go ahead and hit pause and work out this on your own problem here at the bottom. And here's the answer. I rewrote the polynomial as a sum of 2 groups. I factored out the greatest common factor from each group, and once I did so, I was left with a common factor of 4t plus 7 in each term. So I factored that out, and then this is what I was left with once I factored it out. So this is my final answer. Example number 2. This is the exact same process, except remember, whenever you're factoring, you always have to ask yourself, is there a greatest common factor that I can factor out at the very beginning? And here the answer is yes. I can start this process by factoring out 4q at the very beginning. And then once I do so, this is what I have left. So now what do? Well, now I just go through the exact same process. I need to take what is inside these parentheses and I need to factor them by grouping. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to rewrite this polynomial that's inside the parentheses as a sum of two binomials. Then I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor from each group. Then I can factor out this q minus 2 from each term. And this is what I have left when I do so. And so this is going to be my final answer, because you have to make sure that you put that 4q back in at the end. Whatever you factor out at the beginning, you have to make sure you put back in at the end. We've talked about this in a couple lessons already. Whatever you factor out at the beginning, you have to make sure you put back in at the end, because mathematically this and this are equivalent. These are the factors of this polynomial. And so how do I check my answer? Well, I need to multiply this 4q with this first binomial. Then I can multiply this binomial with the q minus 2. And once I FOIL these out, once I multiply these two binomials together, and then I put my answer in standard form, that's what I should get. Okay, so pause the video and work out this on your own problem, and you're going to factor by grouping, but make sure you factor out the greatest common factor first at the beginning if possible. And here's the answer. I factored out a 3h at the very beginning. This is what I had left. I factored this polynomial here by grouping, and then in my final answer I had to make sure that I put that 3h back in at the end. Please don't factor it out, but then forget to put it back in at the end. And finally, example number 3. This is the exact same process, except I want to make sure you understand what to do when you have this negative here, because that can get a little tricky. So again, the first step is always to factor out any greatest common factor first at the very beginning if possible. Now here I don't have anything that I can factor out, so I'm going to go ahead and go straight into factoring by grouping. So what am I going to do? I'm going to rewrite this polynomial as a sum of two groups. So look at what I did here. Please make sure you understand how mathematically this and this are identical. I just rewrote it as a sum of two groups. And this is the first group. But be careful, the second group is negative 2m minus 3. Okay, now what am I going to do? I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor from each group. So here, my greatest common factor is 4m squared, and that's what I have left. Now be careful. Here, my greatest common factor is negative 1. I'm factoring out a negative 1, and then this is what I have left. Whenever this first term is negative, you always have to factor out a negative 1. Let me repeat that because it's extremely important that you remember that. Whenever this first term is negative, you always have to factor that out. Okay, and so now what do? I'm left with a common factor of 2m plus 3 in each term. I factor that out, and this is what I have left once I do so. So this is my final answer. Okay, so now go ahead and hit pause and work out this on your own problem. And be careful, don't forget about that negative. Okay, so here's the answer, and what did I do? I started by rewriting this problem as a sum of two groups, and I don't want this first term to be negative here. So I don't want to just factor out a 10 from this group. I need to factor out a negative 10 from the group. And then this is what I have left once I do so. And so here's the final answer. Okay, so go ahead and start your homework, and if you have any questions while you're doing your homework, please email me, and I will be happy to work out any problem that you're struggling with.